Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Music Rewind, a podcast where we look to tell the stories behind our favorite albums. I'm your host, Steve Epley, and in each episode I will invite a guest on to tell us about their favorite music album, how they discovered it, and what makes it special to them. Today on Music Rewind, we are bringing you something a bit different, another Roundtable bonus episode. This time we are bringing back some previous guests to talk 90s music. First up is Michael Borowski from our discussion of Pearl Jam Versus.
How you doing? Thanks for having me back, man.
Next up is Don Brown from our episode of DMX's It's Dark and Hell is Hot.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me back as well. I'm excited to talk about 90s music and hear from the fellas and fellowship.
And finishing out our roundtable is Danny Prokop from our episode of Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary.
Thanks for having me back, Steve. Looking forward to diving into 90s music with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen, and appreciate you joining us today. So what we'll be doing this evening is every member of our ragtag group of 90s music scholars has a few questions for the roundtable. We'll use those questions to kickstart the conversation and either praise or mock our colleagues on their musical tastes. And as our moderator, I'm going to go with Dom for the first question. I thought your first one was pretty good lead off.
Yeah, no one told me I had to read.
Yeah.
Where did I send it? Did I send it to you via text or email? I thought I sent it via email. Oh, here we go. Perfect. All right, guys. So the first question I had is, how has 90s music impacted your, perception of what you guys consider as, good music? What do you guys think about that?
You want me to take it, Steve?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, Dom, that's a great question because I heard a lot of times, I've read this a few times, but like people's perception of what they consider good music kind of solidifies at like 16 or 17. And you sort of make those basis or make those choices off what you were listening to then. And obviously we all grew up in that time, but still to me, I think that it definitely considers good music because even stuff I listen to now, newer bands, I can trace the sound that I like back to those bands that I first fell in love with in the 90s. So, there are some times where you kind of hear something and you're like, oh, that's derivative, not realizing that every band that you ever listen to is derivative. But so I think it pretty much shapes what I listen to now, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse, I will admit.
That's a very good, take on that because, if you look at what's happening like right now in the, hip hop and R&B genre, you're seeing a lot of that, right? You're seeing a lot of songs that were older songs that are now being recycled. If you listen to like what's on the pop 40, the top 40 songs or whatever. And it's a lot of old school 90s music and beats and melodies. And actually, I think one of the Billboard Hot 100 songs is by an artist named Lotto, and she's from Atlanta, actually. And her song is Big Energy, but it's a sample of Mariah Carey's song. I think it's Honey. I think the song is. But anyways, it's like the number one song in the country, and it's a 90s refresh or early 2000s refresh song. So we're starting to see that really across a lot of genres, and even like on the alternative and those really pop rock bands, you're seeing a lot of that too. So I think there's a lot of validity in that statement.
I'd put money on the fact that Mariah Carey song probably samples something from the 70s.
Oh, absolutely. It did.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely did.
And that you could trace it all the way back even further.
Yep.
Now, that Honey, that's the one when she's on the jet ski, that video? Right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great memory.
I love Mariah Carey 90s, man. I'm sorry. She's smoke show in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently you watch it a lot of times on mute, Michael.
Yeah. I like your voice too. I know we're talking about later about like kind of stuff that we don't listen to a lot or anything like that. But I'll get to that later. But I really do I'm all about like the girl singers and like the girl groups and stuff from the 90s. But yeah, I guess, to kind of go on with that, I guess for my answer on that, I think it impacted a lot because when we were growing up, it was like, all right, well, you just had like your parents' music. And then, so my parents was like, all right, classic rock, classic rock, classic rock, classic rock. And because of honestly, MTV and staying up and watching stuff, it got me to expand my, different type of music. There wasn't a lot of soul music or R&B or anything like that being played at the house. But because of MTV Raps and 120 minutes and stuff like that on MTV in the 90s. Like there's so many different genres that now, because of what I listened to in the 90s, like it pushed, so many, like to me, to so many different ways, like of different things I listen to now. And that's one of the hardest things now is there's just so much out there, and it's so good that I feel like I only get through like one record, like one or two times, and that's it. And I think back when I was like 16, how I would go buy a CD or something, I'd listen to it like 50 times. And, and now it's just because of what happened in the 90s and then like just the crossover of like different genres too that happened. I mean, you look what happened with like, the Judgment Night soundtrack where you had like rap and rock together.
It's on my list.
Then Linkin Park showed up, and then like those bands just kind of keep like pushing over. And I guess you could even go farther back, I guess, in the 80s with like Aerosmith and Run DMC. But there's just so many people playing on stuff, like Jack White playing on like Beyonce's record. It's just because of what happened in the 90s, it expanded your palette, I guess. Like your tastes were there's just so much more to like digest, I guess, because of the different things that we listened to back then.
You hit on something really key to me, is that Linkin Park discussion, because Steve knows this. I was really close to doing Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park as my album to review instead of DMX, because I mean that thing, it was captivating. It was something fresh for me. Obviously not growing up in a household that necessarily listened to rock like that, but just kind of hearing a different perspective from them. I mean, it was amazing. And then, you got that just from them in general. And then you had the crossover album with them and Jay-Z, Collision Course, which was, amazing in itself in its own right. I mean, that's a very good statement on that for sure.
What's interesting about that too is, Margaret, you had mentioned like the Judgment Night soundtrack. Yep. When you had, Pearl Jam and Onyx, I think were the pairing, and Anthrax and Public Enemy. And some of those things. But I think for the first time for me, and you had mentioned, Michael, too, about like, MTV Raps, and then it was like 120 minutes or, different ways that you got music. There wasn't really, and I don't know if it was just, we growing up in a small town or everybody else had the same thing, but there was really you could listen to Public Enemy, you could listen to the Beastie Boys, you could listen to Nirvana. Like there was no, I guess, divide on what you could or could not. What was cool, if you were a metalhead or something, this is what you had to listen to. Or if you liked hip hop, this is what you had to listen to. You kind of listen to everything. And what I think is cool about that is when you see artists, especially from the 90s, and a lot of other artists did it too, but, in generations past where you had like the Rolling Stones had, some of the blues guys open up for them and stuff that obviously impacted them and had their records. But in the 90s, when you had, Lollapalooza obviously is a big example when you have like Public Enemy opening for Ministry, and then you've got Body Count, and then Ice Cube, and some of those bands where you could kind of be a fan of everything, because I think there was blurred lines of what, what you could and could not, in quotes, listen to, I guess.
And not like Robin Thicke, blurred lines.
I was going to make that joke, but I figured it was too easy. And
if you don't make it, I'll always make it if it's too cheesy.
Dude, I got him in a lot of trouble, and the fallout from that. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was, what was the model's name? Emily Ratajkowski. I mean, she was like, it was like one of the most toxic, like filming sessions. Like he was groping her and everything. Ugh.
Yeah. Not good.
Not at all.
So my answer on that, Dom, I took it in a different direction as far as what 90s music impacted your perception of good music, because the 90s really became my first realization of prepackaged pop music. All those one-hit wonders and prepackaged kind of boy bands and girl bands that really don't stand the test of time. You got one single out of them and then they're gone, and it's really kind of terrible. I'm thinking like Gerardo and just other things off the top of my head. But those things that were unfortunately dominating the charts, you got your Chumbawambas and your other things in there. And that showed me how good the other stuff was. When you've got Pearl Jam and Nirvana or the Pumpkins or whomever, Mariah Carey, belting, Boyz II Men, harmonizing. You've got true talent versus the let's just put some pretty people on a screen and sell a video types of thing. So that highlighted the good music and really highlighted the bad music, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Milli Vanillis of the world.
Yeah, there you go. That poster child for what I was just talking about.
That's interesting, though, Steve, because I think that also speaks to sort of the evolution or maturity of being a music listener, is because you might have fallen in love with, say, the Public Enemies or Nirvana, but then by the end of the decade, you have some of those bands who they're marketed because they now look like those bands or now sound like those bands. So when you say, like those production houses or whatever, you've got the guys now who, we all have long hair, we all have ripped jeans. We might not be from Seattle, once you get to the middle of late 90s, but we're going to look like it. We might not be from New York, but we're going to look like it. We're going to dress in khakis and Converse, because Dre's been rapping about it for a decade. So it's interesting that you said that, because a lot of that music is extremely popular towards the end of the decade. So it's interesting to see that there's like a point in time where you're like, yeah, that's manufactured and not for me, even though there's bands that are still huge to this day. I'm talking about Creed, and I am.
Come on, Limp Bizkit, yo.
But you know what I mean? Like, there's Rage, right? And then there's Limp Bizkit.
Right.
And people are going to argue that they're both on the same plane. And to me, that it's completely different. Yes, thank you, Don. They're completely different.
But you've also got true talent that succumbs to that. And I'll throw Mariah Carey out there, in my opinion. I mean, she owned the 90s. Her voice was amazing. And then you as she goes along, I think she even did some rapping, and just she changed a lot of her music persona. I don't know who she is. I don't know her personally. I'm just what I see on the screen or here. And what she did later in her career is not the same as what she did in the 90s. And the 90s was phenomenal for her. And I think that she kind of took advice from people who were trying to change her to fit what was selling.
That's a great point, because she was, like you said, when she first came out, I mean, I guess late 80s or early 90s, she was more like a pop singer, like the Always Be My Baby type songs and stuff like that. And then toward the latter half of the 90s, early 2000s, it was more of that hip hop influenced R&B. And it was,
she did that single with ODB, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Me and Mariah go back like babies and pacifiers. Come on.
That's a classic line there. Rest in peace, ODB.
Oh,
there we go.
But yeah, you're spot on, though. You watch her Unplugged special. That was something, miraculous there. That was beautiful. And I couldn't picture that person in the singing she was doing there. It was wonderful. Do something with ODB and it's about those lyrics. I don't know.
But she made a ton of money off that song, though. Jeez.
That's what it comes down to.
It's all about where the money resides.
I'll ask my first one, I guess. What was the most underappreciated album or like song from the 90s? Do you want me to answer this right for me?
Go ahead and answer, but I'll say it's okay if you have a couple.
I do.
Many of these questions might have multiple answers and stuff per person. That's fine.
So for me, for a song, and these guys were always kind of like second fiddle to like the Four Horsemen of grunge. And I always thought Stone Temple Pilots' Vaseline was always just like a very underrated song. And it's one of my favorite songs from the 90s. It's to me their best song. And then also a couple, just honestly, anything by Hole. And I know I'll probably get some pushback about Courtney Love, but I think that first couple Hole records are really good.
I'll back you up on those, Mike.
And
Celebrity Skin, come on.
Yeah, and then I want to mention these guys just because I think more people should talk about them, because there's one record and I'll give a shout out to my buddy Adam Swisher on this one, who found the CD for us at Musicland. The band was called Four Squirrels and the record is called Example. It came out in 1995 and it came out I think it was 2 weeks before the guys were coming back from a gig at CBGB's in New York City. and they're coming back to Florida, and they're from I think Jacksonville, and their tire blew out in their van, and I think 2 out of the guys died out of the band, or 3 of the guys, the lead singer and all of them. And the album came out 2 weeks later. And what's really creepy is he wrote a song about Kurt Cobain on there. And if you listen to the lyrics, it's about, like his death and everything. And then this guy's dead. Steve, check them out there. It's a very it's grungy.
That's a new one.
It's grungy, but it's just a good rock band. I just think they're unappreciated because we just found out about them by a guess, because our buddy thought it was a funny name for a band. And then it turned out to be a really good record. And, I just don't think that those guys could have been something big, or they could have just been garbage. I don't know. I mean, we'll never know because the guys died in the band. So those are just a couple of things that I was thinking of for that.
Yeah, I'll check them out. I put down, I've got one single, but then one album. For an album, Hand on the Torch from Us 3. You might remember the song Cantaloupe. Is that Fantasia?
Bop, get funky, get funky.
Yeah, that's actually a really good album.
Okay.
The lead track is always a classic to me. But it samples the Art Blakey Quintet, a great jazz quartet. But just check out that whole album. It's really great. But then there's a Tom Petty song that I think did not get the love it deserved, which was Walls from the She's the One soundtrack.
Great song.
I love that song. It's one of my favorite Tom Petty songs, but it's never in anyone's, front and center for Tom Petty.
That was
I think it should be.
That was written during the Wildflowers, right? The session, is that on the expanded one? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
That whole era for him when he got together is just fantastic. Mm-hmm. That's a great song.
Steve, that actually is in my top 25 songs of the year when that song came out. Oh, yeah. Nice. That Excel document I sent you is super cool.
I've always loved Walls. And just the Tom Petty channel, occasionally you'll get some demo track versions of it. Pretty neat to listen to. Dom, what about yours?
Oh, man, mine's tough. Gosh, I mean, there's so many good ones. Honestly, I'm gonna go a little cheesy route here, and obviously mine's gonna be a little more hip hop focused. But I'm gonna go with "I Get Around" by Tupac, featuring Digital Planets. Yeah, it was Shock G who refers. Of course, he was 2 artists, Shock G, and he was also Humpty Dumpty. Yeah,
yeah.
And that song, man. Yeah, exactly. And so sad.
Digital Underground, right?
Digital Underground. Yep, I'm sorry. Digital Underground. Yep.
And Planets would be a good one for one-hit wonders. Smooth like that. Rebirth of Slick.
Yeah. That's right. You're right. But that song, man, it's just one of those songs. To this day, when I hear it, no matter what I'm doing, it just makes me just feel good. It makes me just want to get excited. I could be having the worst day ever, and I hear that song, and it just takes me to a whole nother space, and I'm in it. I'm excited. I'm feeling better. Life could be a shitty day. The day just becomes better, and I'm going for it. And that's the one for me.
The lyrics that might get you in trouble this day and age. Though.
That's absolutely true. I mean, absolutely true. Yeah, there's definitely some obviously sexually suggested conversations that might lead to some I hate to say it, but some Bill Cosby type tendencies or anything. It's bad. It means drinking and all this and that and all that. But I mean just the overall theme of the song and just his message in it, and then the melodies and the punchlines that Tupac gives you in that, and obviously it shows you why he was one of the most gifted songwriters of our generation, and obviously he was taken too soon from us. Before he had a lot of good music left to give us, which he still gave us a ton of great music, even after his death. So, but
what's crazy is as soon as you mentioned the name of that, it's one of those songs. You mentioned the title, and it instantly is in my head. I'm singing along. I'm hearing the beats. It's just one of those songs that is
the piano at the rounding piano at the beginning pops right into your head. Yep.
And a great video too. It's a funny video at that. So much so that there was a couple movies that actually try to kind of play off of that, off of the video and incorporate it into the film. So it was pretty good. But that would be my one. Well, that'd be the one I would call out. I mean, there's so many others you can name, but I think that one kind of for me just resonates.
How about you, Danny?
You know, it's hard for me because I was looking around at some stuff, and I think the 90s had some of the, when I think of underappreciated albums or songs or even bands, is a lot of things that get lumped into like sort of the one-hit wonder. So just for fun, I looked up like the one-hit wonders of the 90s, and it's bands like Blind Melon. They had some really good records, or two really good records, but there are, you know, so-called a one-hit wonder. Even a band like the Screaming Trees, and the lead singer just passed away, Mark Lanigan, but Sweet Oblivion, that record is very underappreciated to me. And I was actually talking about it with a buddy of mine, and he was like, well, that's their most famous record. And I was looking at it. It sold like 300,000 copies, even though it had a hit, quote unquote, hit single on it. So not everybody knows it. But a band for me that I love, and I've seen they're getting a little bit more, I guess, not publicity, but people are newer bands, especially in like the hardcore area, believe it or not, are name checking them. But a band from Champaign, Illinois called Hum, You'd Prefer an Astronaut. That record, I think, is just a masterpiece of sort of shoegaze, great songwriting, great lyrics, great band. So I would definitely put them up there as one of those. And there's, you know, but like you said, there's so many quote unquote underappreciated bands when you dive into it in the 90s. It's a very fruitful area. I know that's why we're talking about it, but even, you know, like I said, one hit wonders, like you talk about like the Toadies. Their album Possum Kingdom is a great record, but you might know one song, or Fountains of Wayne, Harvey Danger, all these bands that
you just keep going through all my one-hit wonder list now.
I'll stop.
I was like, I'm looking, I see Hum Stars written down. I got Harvey Danger, Flagpole Sitter.
I'm sorry. I'll stop.
No,
there's some really good stuff.
I thought you were going to say Not a Surf, honestly, because that's a band that is, now that I'm thinking about it, is probably one of the most unappreciated bands of the 90s, because Popular doesn't even sound like the rest of their catalog.
And I would argue
their catalog is so good.
And I would say it's not even in the top 3 on that album. I think Stalemate is the best one on that album.
It's not even a top 3 song by those guys. It's not even a top 5 song.
Yeah, and I had mentioned their album, The Weight is a Gift, on my Sunny Day episode, Steve. They're still a band that's putting out great stuff.
Yeah, their stuff is so. Yeah, Dan, like I thought for sure that's who you're going to say was Not a Surf, because Popular just got remade by.
I've got so many bands, man. I'm like,
somebody remade Popular.
Yeah, the band is called Pom Pom Squad, and it's a girl who's the lead singer of the band, and she redid the entire video with her of all like the main characters, and the guy from Not a Surf is in it playing guitar and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Check it out. It's the video's on. I'm sure it's on YouTube and stuff. But her album came out last year.
Who is it?
It's the band's called Pom Pom Squad. And it's kind of like a grittier Olivia Rodrigo, who was kind of like the big hit singer from last year, the 18-year-old girl who I can't think of the Driver's License was the song, something else, but like this girl is like, it's kind of like rougher. It's more alternative, I guess, but it's pretty good.
What question you got for us, Danny?
We sort of touched on this a little bit when we were talking about the Judgment Night soundtrack, but to me, the 90s were like soundtracks played a huge role. I remember there were times where I would have a soundtrack, or somebody would be playing a soundtrack to a movie I didn't even know existed, but the soundtrack was awesome. So the question is, what's sort of the best soundtrack or compilation album of the 90s? And for me, I had a few. I think 1A and 1B for me is the Single soundtrack, and then the Crow soundtrack. So single soundtrack, I mean, it's sort of all of the bands from Seattle except for two. Paul Westerberg, lead singer of the Replacements from Minnesota, and then Smashing Pumpkins here from Chicago, but sort of encapsulated that whole Seattle sound and had you name them, they're on it. And then the Crows soundtrack I thought was great. It had The Cure and Nine Inch Nails. Stone Temple Pilots is also on it. Mike, you had mentioned them before, but two of my, like, just put them on as a record and let them play all the way through, even if you haven't seen the movie or don't care for the movie. But two amazing soundtracks for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Singles is the one I put down. I mean, that's one of my favorite movies ever. It's one of the reasons I wanted to move to Seattle when I was a kid. Besides the music, was like and when my wife and I lived there last May, like, we went to the apartment where the garage is at and everything, and stood pictures in front of it. But yeah, that soundtrack, I mean, only one song on that soundtrack is actually on an actual album. So, like, everything that's on there is, like, those bands gave those songs up to be on that soundtrack, which is pretty cool. And then I got to agree with you on, like, The Crow. Like, I'm not, like, a big fan of Helmet, but that Helmet song on there is really good.
Their record is Betty.
Yeah.
Very underappreciated album, going back to underappreciated albums of the 90s, yeah.
But, yeah, those two, even the Clueless soundtrack was pretty good, honestly.
So that's the thing, too. When I was looking at it, like, thinking of, like, the Clueless soundtrack or, like, Can't Hardly Wait, when you have, like... Now I'm going to blank on it, but, like, the Replacements are on that. Guns N' Roses is on it. And I forget who. I'm blanking.
Radiohead, I know.
Way to bring that up.
And then Romeo and Juliet, wasn't that in the 90s too?
That was, yeah.
The Leonardo DiCaprio one. That was a pretty good soundtrack too.
Yeah, that had that song, that pop one-hit wonder, that Sixpence. No, it wasn't Sixpence.
Sixpence None the Richer.
Cardigans, Love Fool.
Oh yeah,
that was the one off that.
Which is a cover song, by the way.
Oh, is it?
By the Laws. Yeah,
It is.
So I'll go with mine. I've got three that I just wanted to mention. Just because you kind of have to, I'm going to say the Forrest Gump has to be out there.
Oh yeah,
it's not 90s music, but it came out in the 90s.
Totally.
Yeah.
Kind of. But but the other two, Above the Rim. Fantastic soundtrack with
a good song.
Yes.
Regulate and Afro Puffs and just several
great
tracks on there. But then my favorite is The Commitments. And again, not 90s music per se, but came out in the 90s, and it is a soundtrack I still listen to this day. Such amazing soul music from this Irish band out of nowhere. So great movie, great soundtrack. Dom, are you still with us, or are you having connection issues?
She said, "Oh, that's
no, I'm still here."
So what's your best soundtrack compilation?
He's on the move.
Yeah, I'm on the move. I'd say for me, it's a tough choice. I got several albums that really resonate with me. As far as in the 90s, because you had a lot of good, like, soundtrack compilation albums. So I would say, though, for me, one that kind of, and I think about my childhood, which sticks to me, is, it's a little bit different, because it was kind of it wasn't just, like, strictly, like, one genre, but the He Got Game album. And it was a film by Spike Lee that came out in 1998. So you got some R&B, you got some jazz, you got a little bit of everything on it. And for me, that one kind of resonated with me and stuck with me because it was just a different amount of type of music that was on that one album. I mean, you had some orchestra stuff, you had some some R&B and some old school, some blues, and that one stuck with me for sure.
Cut off there at the end, but yeah, I agree. That's a great soundtrack.
Steven Stills was on the He Got Game song.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the soundtrack right now. I was like, oh, Steven Stills, cool.
All right, well, I'll ask my first question here. What band or artist best represents the 90s to you? Like, not just everybody, just what's your band that just represents the 90s? To me, I already mentioned them earlier, but Smashing Pumpkins and Mariah Carey, those two just to me are 90s up and down. I know they've both done things after the 90s, but that's really where their strongest were. And it just, I hear them, it takes me right back to high school.
I got to say, there's a lot of Mariah Carey talk on this that I was not expecting at all.
No, I gotta go back and study up.
I'm just like, I feel it's amazing to me.
The woman had
Mariah Carey on.
The woman had how many number ones? Did she like beat out
90s.
Elvis or something? Yeah.
No, I agree. I just like.
No, I'm saying, think of the question. It represents the 90s.
I mean, between her and Whitney Houston, I mean, they ran the 90s. I mean, from 90s pop music and R&B, I mean, those two ran it.
Yeah, I mean, really, Garth Brooks, like, there's nobody really knows. I mean, I know he's country, but, like, even, like, a person who doesn't listen to country like me.
Oh, no, Garth Brooks needs to be mentioned in this. Absolutely. I mean,
because I didn't really care for country, but, I mean, I could probably name 15 Garth Brooks songs that I can't get out in my head.
No Fences as an album was gigantic in the Illinois Valley, at least, let alone globally.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say mine. I mean, to me, it's like split, honestly, because like the beginning of the 90s would have been Nirvana. That would have, like, to me, represented the first half. And then the second half was was Radiohead. That's just to me, because when let's be honest, like when the shit of like the music kind of just started to disappear, that was decent. Probably like 96, 97, they kind of like picked up and kind of took the torch with the Bends and OK Computer.
When did OK Computer come out? Was that 97?
Yeah. So I don't know, like because it's the 90s is weird because especially when it comes to music, it's like for like alternative, it's like the first 5 years is, you know, the grunge and the good alternative and stuff. And then you get like your second tier guys and your third tier. And by the time it's the second half of the 90s, you know, you're at Limp Bizkit and Korn and Creed and Acoustic Creed, which is what the hell was that band name?
No, you're right when you think about it. For our age, I mean,
right now
you've got 90 to 94. At least for me, would have been fourth grade through eighth grade, and then 94 through 98 was high school. So it's like almost two separate chunks of the decade that are completely different.
Days of the New, the Acoustic Creed. Yeah.
I thought they were more the acoustic Alice in Chains, but.
Well, they had Alice in Chains and Unplugged, so they had their acoustic. And honestly, the only reason I think I even liked that Touch, Peel, and Burn song or whatever it was is because the guys from Acoustic Cult back home would always cover, and it was pretty cool to see guys that you knew like play something really well. But that's a whole other thing.
I got to go with two albums for the 90s for me, if I think about it, is Nevermind and The Chronic. Just, I think they sort of encapsulate, I know they're, maybe an easy way to go, but they sort of encapsulate what is great about the 90s. You've got two records that still stand the test of time. I mean, so much so that Dre was, the Super Bowl.
Yeah, right, man.
And then, sorry.
Is he getting yelled at? Because I feel like he's getting yelled at.
You all right, man?
Hope you're okay over there, Dom.
Verizon is failing me right now. I mean, I'm getting horrible service right now when I'm tethering, whatever, and it's just absolute shit.
It'll cut in now and then, and we get the voices. It's funny.
Oh, shit.
Do we want to postpone? Do we want to do something when he's got more time to do it? Or better connection?
I was thinking if like he answers this, then we can kind of the three of us, and we can bring him back a couple, have him like sit and then come back. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a.
Sure.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. If you, that's a good. I think it was Mike who said that. That's a good suggestion. The three of you kind of roll with it.
I'd be really disappointed if we don't talk about the cherry poppin' daddy. So I mean, that's
squirrel nuts. Are we going to talk about the swing revolution?
I learned how to swing dance in college because that's how fucking big it was.
Ska, Real Big Fish.
Hey, they're on the one-hit wonder list for me. Sell out.
Come on,
with me too, man.
The record company's going to give me lots of money, and everything's going to be all right.
All right, we're gonna keep rolling. He's gonna try and log back in later when he gets to his a stable place, and we'll just keep
Aren't
rolling.
we all looking for a stable place, Steve?
I can't argue that.
Should I go back and answer then the 90s sound or the records for the 90s, or should we just pick up somewhere when he gets back on?
It's the artist or band that represents it, Dan, not the album. Can't even read. I thought you got like a 36 on the reading part of your ACT.
I was listening to the question that was answered and not reading off a script. I'm going to let people behind the fourth wall there, buddy. The question that was answered or asked.
What band or artist best represents 90s music to you?
That doesn't say album.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I accept your answer, though, Dan. That's fine.
I think the answer is right. I think it's a good answer.
No.
I am the moderator. I wear the cape. I make the fucking swoosh noises. This is mine.
I wear the tights in this family. Should we talk about Crash Test Dummies and Superman now? Superman never made any money.
I promised my wife we would mention Crash Test Dummies.
Superman's dead. Fuel, Mike.
Isn't that?
Oh no, it's
Our Lady Peace.
Our Lady Peace.
Marissa's coworker that she used to work with. The brother was a bass player in the band.
My good buddy, his cousin is the founder of I don't know if they're 90s or 2000s, but the band Chevelle. They had the song "Send the Pain Below."
I think they're the aughts.
Early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that first Plahaki saw him a couple times live. He said they were fantastic live.
But what's funny is, so he was the founder of the band, and he came up with the name, right? Mm-hmm. So then he was going to leave the band, and he sold the name to the other guys, and they paid him crap tons of money. And I was like, "You named it after a car that's already trademarked, and you still got paid for it?" And yep.
Yeah, genius.
Yeah,
genius.
Fuck.
Well, we'll continue on with some questions. I'll ask another one here. What's a band or album that didn't click with you in the 90s that you grew to appreciate later in life?
I think I can answer this one. When I was in high school,
you can say Mariah Carey. It's okay.
I hated Sublime. Hated Sublime with a fiery hot passion in high school. And then, I don't know, maybe I smoked enough weed in college to understand it or something, but now I dig it. I mean, it's nice, relaxing stuff. I mean, it's not terrible. It's not the first thing I would put on, but I just remember guys or people in school wearing Sublime stuff and just be like, oh, this band is just garbage. It reminded me at the time of and Steve, you'll probably be mad, but Jimmy Buffett, I hate Jimmy Buffett as well. But I really did. I got into Sublime more later because I thought listening to him play guitar, he's a better guitar player than I gave him credit for, especially on the acoustic. It's kind of the same thing. I'm not a huge Zach Brown fan, but that guy can freaking shred on acoustic guitar. And it's so appreciative, especially when I've tried and failed to play the guitar at least 10 times in my life. So, and his lyrics are kind of corny and all that stuff, but it's some good stuff that you can always put on at a party and people are going to go they're not going to be turn that off, While when I was at parties in high school, even obviously I didn't get invited to a lot of them because I always hated Sublime. But yeah, that is a band for sure. I got into way later.
I listened to a lot of Sublime senior year. Yeah, it was heavy on rotation in the garage. So
I got to go with Tool. Believe it or not, I loved Undertow. I loved Sober and some of those early songs, but then for whatever reason, it didn't click with me. I liked what I heard, but I never dug deep into them. And then, as Michael can attest to, is recently, especially we went to see him. Oh, geez, now 3 years ago now, Michael.
Yeah, 2019
on the Fear Inoculum, whatever the new record is called. Sorry. But yeah, they're a band that I went through, and then just once I listened and dug deeper into it and heard it, it's everything I love. I don't know why it didn't click with me first. I think there was just so much other things going on. And I liked the singles and everything, but I never did my due diligence and listened to the full records more than a handful of times. And yeah, it was a big miss on my part. And they're obviously fantastic band, but it just didn't click with me at first for some reason.
I got to agree with you on that too. Like I was into Undertow, and then I don't think you and I ever listened to Anemia, like ever.
No.
When we were in high school, and then I didn't really care for him. And then A Perfect Circle came out when we were in college, and I was like, oh man, I forgot that Maynard has this fantastic voice. And I'm like, maybe I should go back and listen to, the other Tool stuff. And I got into that and like Opiate and like that live, like it was like live and like kind of like oddball stuff because they did No Quarter live on that disc. And I freaking love Led Zeppelin, and the No Quarter was really cool how they did that. But yeah, I'm 100. That was the other one I was thinking too, Dan, was Tool.
Yeah, you know what? And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if it was something because to me they were one of those bands where you were either obsessed with them or you didn't like them. There was no, I like a couple songs. Like their fans are so dedicated and so like all in. And I think for me it was like what I remember growing up. What I thought was awesome is like Sober. The video was on 120 minutes and it was on Headbangers Ball. I was like, this is awesome. But the stop animation was just a great video. But yeah. And then seeing them live is just amazing.
Tool is another band that was heavy rotation in Hank's garage.
That's exactly, I think, how I got into them a lot more too, was walking over like after a couple drinks at my house to go over to the Hank's garage 2 blocks down for a couple more drinks. And then I'd come in and you guys would be rocking Anima. Or Anima, I can never know how to say that.
I'm not sure how it's actually pronounced. Because those two albums
thing.
Yeah, that one and Undertow were just amazing albums. My live version or my live experience with Tool was less than stellar. It's one of the worst concerts I've ever been to.
Really?
Yeah, I saw them out in Hawaii, and bands often come to Hawaii and put on a half-ass show, like just enough to pay for their vacation and call it a day. And they did it on the UH campus, and there was no alcohol. So right off the bat, there was just a lot of angry people. And then the concert was very weird. There was a moment where there's like a 20-minute bass solo where Maynard turned around and played PlayStation for 20 minutes. And everyone's stone sober. So we're like, what the hell are we doing? And it wasn't even a good bass solo. It was literally dun, 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 dun. For 20 minutes. It was just terrible. And most people left early. That was on the tour for Schism, Lateralis,
Gotcha.
That album.
Okay. Yeah.
And which was an okay album. I don't think it was as good as their previous ones. But I haven't really listened to them since. They kind of faded from my playlist.
See, that's funny because I like Lateralis. Like that's my favorite.
Well, I was just going to say, Steve, give the new record Fear Inoculum a chance, because that's really, when that came out, 2 years ago now already, or whenever that was going to be.
I think it was 2019.
Okay.
Because then Pearl Jams came out the next year.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna listen to this, and I was like, holy cow, this is just a fantastic record. And then went back and sort of caught up. And then saw them live, and they ended up putting on a good show. It's kind of cool when you're, the bands from then are now older, maybe sober, for the guys who couldn't really pull it off when they were not sober. Not insinuating anything from those guys, but and they put on a good show.
Yeah, Steve, I would say, like, as a guy who, likes Floyd, those last 3 records are very progressive. Like, it takes the whole 10 minutes to get into the song. But, Parable and Parabola, like, off of Lateralis, to me is, like some of the best, like, progression and, like, lyrics, like, kind of all together, like, from them. But that's just, like, my opinion, man.
That concert just sucked my enjoyment of Tool out of it. A bad concert will do that sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
It's just because we were so pumped for it. I mean, we were really looking forward to that, but
disappointing. The show Danny and I went to. I was actually at the flu when I went to it, and I told my wife about it after, and like for Christmas this year, she bought me tickets to go see Tool with her. She wants to go see it. She was like, man, the way you and Danny talked about that show, she's like, I want to go. Like, so we're going, like, I think in a couple weeks to United Center to go see him, just because we were so, it was a good show to me. I thought it was great.
If they come out and they say they're going to do Undertow in its entirety, I'm there.
You'd be lucky if you get a song from Undertow, one or two.
Steve, it's funny though, you mentioned seeing a band that totally turns you off, and a 90s band that I saw, and it turns out it was in a tumultuous time for them, but the Red Hot Chili Peppers, it was early 2000s. And I think what soured it for me is that Queens of the Stone Age was opening up. And I don't even know if their record was out yet. Like, it was new. Queens was pretty new. Maybe Rated R, I think, is their first record, had just come out. But they blew them out of the water. Like, Queens was amazing. And I don't know if the Peppers were just having a bad night or if it was just, I was having a bad night. But it was like, oh, I don't want to listen to them.
They definitely went through some turmoil, though, so you might have caught them during the
I agree, though, because I saw them, the only time I've ever seen them was at Lala, like, in 2000, like 6 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, man, I can't wait to see the Peppers when they come around this year. And I was like, man, I kind of thought they sucked live. Like, they seemed like they were just phoning it in. Like, they didn't really... They seem like, yeah, we're like too good to be at Lollapalooza. Like, like Lollapalooza kind of made you guys.
They headlined Bonnaroo in like 07 or 08. And, it's a festival set. So your hits mainly. And they did fine. I mean, everybody enjoyed it. It wasn't something I was going to write home about, but I mean, it was an enjoyable show.
Yeah. So. Well, and again, with a band like that, who's, well documented substance abuse and all that kind of stuff and the turmoil with everybody, you don't know if it was what was going on behind the stage, or behind the scenes rather. There's a lot of bands that, I'll say, oh, I love them live. And somebody like, well, when I saw him, he could barely speak, the singer couldn't speak or the guitar player wasn't there. And you're like, oh, well, then I guess, I guess you had a bad experience.
So my answer for this question is Weezer. Blue Album was pretty popular, the late 90s. And I never just latched onto it. I'd heard Buddy Holly was everywhere. And, I thought it was an okay track, but it just kind of never really jumped out at me. And when the Green Album came out, I got, so let me give these guys a fair shot. And I listened to it, loved the Green Album. So I went back, bought the Blue Album. And then it was like, oh, okay, this is actually really goddamn good. And so I stuck with Weezer for many years.
And what do you think about Pinkerton? Because that's my favorite record from them.
And that's
like the indie favorite. Like weird guy that that's just like the indie weird guy answer for those guys always though.
I'm not the biggest fan of it. The Blue Album to me is kind of their pinnacle. It's a great album. The Green Album is great too, but just not as good. The Red one wasn't bad. I would put that on the same level as Pinkerton. And then I know they've got some other ones in there that I just haven't listened to. But you shake your head.
I know I can't because anything after Maladroit is really tough to listen to.
So Michael, I don't know if this is in defense of Weezer because I feel the same way you do. But what I find interesting is that even when I say it, it's like, oh my God, their lyrics, like, oh, the music sounds great. And then the lyrics, And then you go back and you're like, wait, I'm defending a band or the lyrics, and then their biggest hits are about unraveling a sweater, looking like Buddy Holly, riding a surfboard to work.
Right.
You're like, oh. And then Pinkerton's got some real questionable shit on it. So now they're singing about pork and beans, and I'm all of a sudden upset because it's not intellectual enough for me.
If you take out the song Beverly Hills, the Red Album's really good.
Well, do you know that, like, he actually, you want to talk about dorky spreadsheets, like, he has Excel documents with, like, programmed, like, stuff to, like, he can make a song, like, out of, like, this Excel document that he has put together from all these different lyrics that he
like with
slaps together.
Stuff?
Yeah. Like, because when he went to Harvard and he came back, he was like, I can write a pop song. Like, this is exactly how you do it, ABC. And he just goes to this thing and he can just create them. Like, which I thought, well, in a way that's kind of genius. In another way, it's like, man, that's just like the laziest writing I've ever heard.
I got to see them maybe about a year or two before I got married down here in Atlanta. And it was actually a really good show. I felt really old being there. So this would have been 2010, 2009, somewhere in there. Because me and my buddy, we were easily, we didn't fit in with the young kids. We didn't fit in with the dads who brought their kids. We were just kind of somewhere in the middle. But it was actually a really good show. And during Hash Pipe, he actually brought in children's orchestra from one of the local middle schools.
Oh, that's cool.
And they actually played Hash Pipe on their kid instruments. And it was really neat. Just like a very avant-garde sort of way to play one of their hits.
Yeah,
we'll see. When I saw them, I thought they were boring. Sorry. They played down at ISU, and it was them, Tenacious D, and Jimmy Eat World. And the best band
on the stage. That's not the most 90s concert ever. I don't know what it is.
The best band that day was Tenacious D. Like, the two guys with acoustic guitars was the best band that day. And I just was like, I was so disappointed because I wanted them to be good, like, live. But he just, like, didn't say anything, and he just, like, played the songs and then was like, thank you, and then walked off stage. But I don't know. I like Radiohead, too, and they do the same thing, I guess. So
my honorable mention for this particular question was the Beastie Boys. Those are guys that I never clicked on, but then later on, they were huge in the barracks. In the Army barracks, they were inescapable.
Oh, Hello Nasty was a huge record in '98.
Well, Ill Communication is one of my favorite records of the '90s that I was going to talk about. But like Sure Shot, So What You Want,
yeah,
and those are great songs. But I didn't really, it didn't click with me then. But later on, and I got to see them at Bonnaroo, and they were fantastic.
Have you seen the Apple documentary thing that they have about the Beastie Boys?
No.
It's the two surviving members, and they basically talk about their history in like a live concert type setting. And it's got like clips and like all their stuff from the beginning to like when I just know Yauk is the guy who died. I can't remember what his rap name was. Adam Kid A-Rock. But it's really good. Like, it's totally the next time if you get next time you buy an iPhone, they give you like a year free of like Apple TV. Like, I would suggest to watch that thing. It's really good.
All right, so you're up, Mike. What's your question for you?
So, in your mind, what's the most like overplayed album or song that you hear from the '90s, and you're just kind of like, this again? I would say my album is. I'll probably get some slack for this, even though I really like this band, but I really like their first 4 records a lot. Is the Black Album from Metallica.
Well, you're not wrong there.
That was the first CD I ever bought, like physically bought. And then I would say songs. It's kind of funny because both these bands had the same song name, and it's Radiohead and Stone Temple Pilots' Creep. Like, those songs are so overplayed and they just bug me. And then anything No Doubt does. I've decided that the farther I've gotten away from the 90s, the more I dislike No Doubt. Like, I don't know if it's because of her solo stuff or what, but just now, like, I just can't listen to like Don't Sleep or any of that stuff. It just, her voice is so great, you know. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Like, they never bothered me, but now I just her voice is just so grating to me now.
Yeah.
You don't like her rapping?
Well,
Bananas. It's the only way I know how to spell it.
yeah.
Oh my God. See, what I was going to say for this one is it's sacrilegious of me to say, but I almost think it smells like Teen Spirit. And let me explain before the pitchforks come out. To me, it's canon and it's one of the greatest songs ever written. But if I was going to sit down and listen to Nirvana, I'm not going to play it. If it comes on, I'm going to listen to it. But if I want somebody to know the essence of Nirvana, it'd be the same way. It's the same way it's become Stairway to Heaven for our generation.
Mm-hmm.
I love the song. It's fantastic. It's one of the greatest songs ever written. But if I want somebody to turn somebody on to Led Zeppelin, it's not Stairway. If I want Nirvana, now I might play Smells Like Teen Spirit. But there's so many better songs, and there's so many. If somebody's like, "Oh, you like '90s music? Here Smells Like Teen Spirit." You're like, "Okay, I get it." You don't necessarily have to hear it again. I don't have to hear Back in Black ever again because it's in my DNA. So it's just one of those songs. I don't think it's sort of that. I don't know. It's one of those things where Nirvana now is like a myth. It's like the Beatles. They're both overrated and underrated because people just take it for granted that they're great, and some people say it without even listening to it or diving into the music. And I think that's sort of where Smells Like Teen Spirit falls in. I think a lot of people like it because they're supposed to. And when you take away sort of that cultural and sort of the songwriting aspect of it and don't really listen to it, it sort of loses meaning. And I think that's sort of where that song is now for me. It's one of my favorite songs, but if it comes on, I don't necessarily need to hear it. Or I'm not going to go back. Man, I got to hear Nirvana. I got to hear Smells Like Teen Spirit. It's the same way with Stairway. It's the same way with Back in Black.
No, that's completely fair. Yeah.
And like you said, that they're almost like a myth. It's like for the Batman trailer when I can't remember. It's on a plane. I think it is that they're doing, but it's it's not them. It's not Nirvana. But it's somebody covering it, and it's
one of those
creepy.
Slowed down, and it's
I think more people were excited that it was a Nirvana cover because it was like, oh my God, it's Nirvana, and more than it was the Batman. And I said that to Marissa. I go, do you know what song this is? And she's like, no, I don't really recognize it. And I was like, oh man, but guys our age are just like, I'll go see the Batman if they just play that in the background the whole time, But they're like a myth. They're not even, it's like a,
exist, we are talking about the 90s. So we should sound like, 4 old Gen X guys complaining about, stay off my lawn. But I think it's one of those things where when you were, I guess the same way that, we would walk around with Led Zeppelin shirts, we could be into it, but somebody else, when you could buy a Led Zeppelin shirt at Target and now that's Nirvana and that's, bands that are still, and it's sort of not to say that it doesn't matter and that people music is timeless, obviously. And, if you fall in love with Led Zeppelin, like we all have, you fall in love with it. I guess what I'm saying is that it's sort of, if it becomes superficial, becomes background where now Smells Like Teen Spirit is in the grocery store. Yep. It's sort of like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Like when your parent, like when my mom says, "Oh, I like that Smells Like Teen Spirit song," and it's like, yeah, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, this noise is it's just so annoying, and I can't believe you listen to this. I remember when he died, we were coming home from Disney World, and I had my headphones on, and my mom's like, "Wake your brother up," and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Oh, that that Kurt Cobain guy killed himself," and I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, he's dead," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then now she's like, "I really like that Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all those bands are pretty good. I would like to go see the Pearl Jam." I'm like, I could, it's like, we can never listen to this again because when you're a teen and you're so angsty, like, this is our music, you can't have it. And now it's like, oh, it's good, huh? I like it. It's a good melody to it. My mom, by the way, is a 75-year-old Jewish woman. So
it smells like Teen Spirit. It's got a good melody to it.
I don't like what he's saying about libidos and mosquitoes. What's that? But
what about who's has a Speedo on? I don't understand.
But no, I guess, just to go back to it, I just think it's one of those things where it's just become part of, again, they're almost, it's like hearing the Beatles, like you instantly know every song by them, right? They're almost like Christmas carols at this point. to everyone on the face of the earth, whether they have never heard the Beatles before or if you've heard them 500 times or 5 million times. You know those songs are in your DNA. To me, that is Stairway, that is Nevermind, or Smells Like Teen Spirit. So it's sort of like overplayed. I don't know. Can you really play those songs enough? But they're not something I need to necessarily sit down and listen to frequently, just because they're ingrained in myself.
Well, yeah, both your Smells Like Teen Spirit and the Black Album from Metallica, I think that's completely fair, because those were just, as the question is, overplayed. They were saturated 100%. And then both of those bands, when you listen to more, the stuff that's not on the radio, that's when you discover why they're such great bands.
Well, and we should say, too, they were played or overplayed with good reason, right? They're phenomenal artists. They're phenomenal records. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, whatever you want to, the argument about Metallica, you know, I'll die on a hill for Metallica. They were one of the best thrash metal bands ever. They became a really good hard rock band. That's my take on it. Do with that information.
And then they made Load and Reload.
But I mean, they were played and overplayed for a reason.
Is that a Saint Anger flag behind you? Is that?
Oh, what a terrible! I'll give Death Magnetic is a pretty good record, but
it was a better return to form. But yeah, Saint Anger was bad.
Saint Anger was so bad. Oh, that drum kit. If you got to hear, that drumming is bad.
There's the drumming was bad, and there's no guitar solos.
No.
I mean,
and you have great guitar players. Like, you have two really good guitar players in that band. Like, maybe they needed Dave Mustaine.
If you watch that documentary, Some Kind of Monster, Kirk Hammett's like, why don't we have guitar solos? And Lars says something like, well, that's trendy. Everybody does that. It's like, that's why you have a lead guitarist, you know, or
you
two
created
lead.
Yeah. You're the one who created the trend.
A skill that these guys have. Use it. We want to hear it. I mean, I don't listen to Fade to Black for the wonderful lyrics of Suicide. No, I'm listening for the guitar solos.
Well, I think what really lost me is when we were on like the Unforgiven Part 7, and you're like, okay, we get the idea.
All right, didn't that kid get out of that fucking box? I mean, what happened? Like, he had to be out by then, right?
No, I mean, you got to be pretty. I mean, what did they celebrate their 30th anniversary 2 years ago or something?
This is their 40th record? Metallica 40 is their tour right now.
Or 40, 40. Yeah, sorry. I meant 40, not 30. Sorry.
Well, the Black Album last year was 30 years old.
Yeah. So you got to – they're doing something right. They're a kick-ass band.
Yeah. Oh, they're fantastic live. I mean, fireworks and – just like rotating stage, and they still sound great live. I mean, and he, not like he's like the greatest singer in the world anyways, but he's not supposed to be, like he's supposed to go out there and growl and snap and,
I think he's underrated.
Metallica snaps are bad.
Yeah, but I think he's underrated. He's got his style. As soon as you hear him, you know it's him.
And speaking of live though, I mean, I've seen him 3 times. My first concert was up at Pecatonica with them, and they were fantastic. And then I saw them at Bonnaroo. They headlined, and it was a great, fantastic set, the first Bonnaroo I went to. But then in the middle of that, it's another Hawaii trip. Saw them out in Hawaii. They sucked.
Really?
And, with Monster Magnet opening for them, and it was there was no pyro. It was a piss-poor venue, and it was just, I don't know. People were sitting.
Yes, I got to see him. This was probably when Load and Reload were coming out. So the opener, Kid Rock opened, then Seven Dust, and then Metallica. So that tells you how long ago this was. And it was a smaller venue. I think it might have been at the Allstate Arena out here. And it was just unbelievable. They came out, and I think they might have played 2 of like songs from Load or Reload or whatever record was at the time, but everything else was just straight, everything you wanted to hear from them. And like you said, the pyro with one, the flash pots and everything.
Yeah, like the pyrotechnics is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and you hit on something there. When I saw them at Pecatonica in '98, they actually said, "We feel like playing old shit," and they did. And it was fantastic. Everyone loved it. Whereas out in Hawaii, they played, let's hear the hits from Load and Reload.
They There's hits on there? I don't think you could put together 10 songs from those 2 records.
I was just going to say Fuel. So when I used to work for, I used to represent a client that was had an NHRA team, and that was played at every starting line. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Wow! At every track, it pumps you up though, man.
At least it had guitar
song.
It's not the worst song.
They had guitar solos on those albums, so
that's a good song. Come on,
it's a step
if we had my brother on here, he'd be fighting. He likes Load and Reload. He's had big conversations with me and Danny about it, and we're like, no, you can't convince us.
He's listened to Ride the Lightning and Master, I assume.
He has, yeah.
See, like I said before, I had to compartmentalize. I had to say, this isn't the band that did that. This is a great hard rock band. So would I rather listen to Load and Reload? I can't stand by Saint Anger. So
no, but Saint Anger's bad.
Load. Well, Death Magnetic is great, and the last one is good too. Now I'm blanking.
Isn't that Death Magnetic?
No.
I don't think they've had anything since then.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to acknowledge the tipping point for them of when Cliff Burton died in '85.
Well, yeah.
So I mean, that was really the end of their thrash.
Oh, Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
Hardwired has got some great tunes on it.
Yeah, that's got some good jams on there. Because isn't that the one that Lady Gaga sang with them from that record on
I know nothing
Grammys?
About Lady Gaga except anything that you or your wife tell me.
It was on Moth Into a Flame. They did,
gotcha.
And she came out in one of the coolest Metallica shirts I've ever seen, and I've been searching for it ever since. And I can't find it.
It was probably $4,000.
Oh, easily. She probably had it made. Yeah, it was probably made for her.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to go with my overplayed songs here. I went with a couple of songs, but to preface this, I worked in a truck stop. I worked at Sapp Brothers for 3 years in high school.
Love it.
So there's 2 songs there that I never ever want to hear again, and one is "Blue" by Leanne Rimes, and you may not remember that one, but that was played.
No, I know it.
Yeah. It's like a yodel song, but the main one is "All I Want to Do" from Sheryl Crow.
Oh,
yeah, I'm with you.
Really?
I can't stand that song anymore. That song, I mean, it was maybe good at the time with a couple of MTV plays, but I mean, that song is just, I don't know, maybe it crosses over to too many fringe genres of country and pop and, I don't know, whatever, but it's just, I hate that song.
Well, it's one of those things that was played everywhere. You couldn't escape it.
Always in a bar because it's such a bar song too.
That's it. Yeah,
it's such a dive bar song.
That and Friends in Low Places.
Yep,
talking about 90s.
Oh, that yes, Friends in Low Places. I don't think I could. That was the one nice thing about my wedding is we did not have anybody who gets married from the Illinois Valley. That song is 100% played.
I don't think I can. I enjoy it when I'm 3 sheets to the wind and everyone's just singing along, it's Piano Man.
It's the dive bar song. Yeah.
Right. But I don't necessarily ever want to hear that one again. So can I change my answer?
It's a special time of entertainment though, when someone sings that karaoke and no one in the crowd joins in.
Oh,
yeah.
They just leave them up there to die. That's
apparently I don't have friends.
Because that one you have to have like a crowd sing with you on that one for sure. Oh man.
That's like up there singing American Pie and you realize there's 3 verses that you didn't realize existed.
Yeah. Can I just do the chorus?
If we could talk about 70s songs that I never need to hear again, that would be one of them.
I'd like to thank you for listening to this part of our 90s Music Roundtable. The full 3-hour episode is already up on our Patreon. Otherwise, the next part will be out in a few weeks. What music topics should we cover in future bonus episodes? Let us know on our socials. Thanks again for listening, and as I always say, listen to the full album. Until next time.
A podcast from the Sidereal Media Group. Back to you, anchors.